Hey, Crawlspacers. Unfortunately, we're having to remember and do a show like this. But Peter David, if you've ever met him in person, was a very, very funny guy. So I don't want this to be too somber. We're sad we lost one of our favorite creators, but I thought it would be fun to reminisce about some of Peter David's best work. And I invited my friend, someone else who was appreciative of his work, which is Michael Bailey. What's going on, Michael?
Hey, how's it going?
Would you agree? Peter David wouldn't want a somber remembrance. He would want some laughs and some good times.
No, I agree with you completely about that.
Yeah.
I mean, humor was a big part of his writing. Even when he was doing something serious, there would be moments of levity. Because what's the old saying? You know, it's still funny if it's sad, and it's still sad if it's funny. So, which makes perfect sense.
No doubt. I mean, I'll give you a little rundown for the listeners watching. He's been on the Crawlspace 3 times as a guest. And I put together some clips, some best of clips of Peter David on the Crawlspace throughout the years. Also, we've got some images. Mike and I are going to talk about some of our favorite runs of Peter David, some of our funny interactions with him. And then we'll listen and we'll take your comments or questions or anything you'd like to talk about or share your remembrances of Peter David. First, Mike, what did he mean to you? He's one of my top 5 of all time writers, personally.
There was a moment or a long period of time where he was my absolute favorite, no question about it, comic book writer. And that had a lot to do with the Hulk. It had a lot to do with his Supergirl run and Young Justice and everything else he touched. And it's funny because for years before I really put a name to a face to a name, even though it's a credit in a comic, I'd read books by him, but it was really the What Savage Beast novel that it clicked who this guy was. And his work has meant a lot to me on a number of levels, but mainly that What Savage Beast novel was there for me at a really kind of low point in my life. Now I had since had worse times, but I was 19, living in a crappy attic apartment and having a pretty miserable time. And I read that book. I literally read it, got to the last page, flipped it over, and started reading it again because I was just like, this guy writes the Hulk better than anybody else. And you know what?
True.
I still feel that way today with all the great Hulk writers that have been before and after him. He is still far and away the greatest.
I agree 100%. I don't think anyone's come close. I think Paul Jenkins did for a little bit, but Peter David's Hulk is the ultimate run on the Hulk. No, it hasn't been touched since, or with respect to Stan Lee and Bill Mantlo, who I like a lot. I think the Hulk is his character through and through, that he's shaped that character more than anybody has.
Yeah, and that I had the exact same thought the other day when I was talking to my buddy Andy Leyland. That it's nothing against Stan Lee. I mean, he co-created the character with Jack Kirby, but have you read Stan Lee's run on the Hulk?
I know.
I have. the first run of Tales to Astonish with the leader story is amazing. Don't get me wrong, and you've read like all of the Hulk, so this. There was a point up until Len Wein got on that character where it was a wash, rinse, repeat of the story. He'd
villain of the month, fight the villain of the month, and go on the run again.
Yeah. He'd be at Gamma Base. Everything would be going okay. Something would happen. He'd go away from Gamma Base. I don't care if it's space or the Inhumans or whatever. He'd be on the run for like a year, and then he'd be back at Gamma Base.
Absolutely. It's like he reset, reboot, right back at the Gamma Base. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, he really had a setup from Bill Mantlo, who did a lot of heavy lifting, I think, on the Hulk. But he really took it and ran with it. So,
and Peter David was very open about that too. Whenever he would talk about when people would give him credit for what he did on the Hulk, he would always mention Bill Mantlo, and that he couldn't have done any of that without Bill Mantlo's work. So I always thought that was kind of classy.
We talked a little bit about clips. The very first time that Peter David was on the Crawlspace was back in February of 2007, which 2 years away from 20 years. That sounds crazy. Mike, we've been podcasting way too long.
Yeah.
Here is a clip, and several have requested it. This is back before the Crawlspace did video. This is audio. So I made it a little bit of a video clip last night. So let's take a listen to a very funny moment of Peter David answering message board questions when we did those from the audience. Here we go.
The first one is from Venom65437. He says,
now I have
"Peter, any
to,
chance-"
does that mean there's like 65,000 guys named Venom before him? I mean, what's up with that?
Yeah, he had to try a long time on.
I
Hotmail
was
to get that
thinking, I'm
address.
just picturing this poor bastard sitting to go 65436. Oh, Christ. 65437.
That poor guy.
Hot damn! Finally! 5 days in front of my computer, and I finally got a frickin' name.
Oh, man.
Okay, go ahead.
Wow. He's going to love that. He's going to be a member of your side, my side for years. Anyway, any chance, he asks, Peter could tell us how he really feels about Peter and Mary Jane being married and not some Joe Q company line. I refuse to believe that every writer, especially one of Peter David's caliber, sees it as a huge problem that just ruins
I've
everything.
actually been on record about this before. I have no problem with it. I mean, you know, again, it comes from the notion of, oh, well, new and interesting storylines. I mean, hell, back in the day when Peter Parker and Mary Jane got married, I actually wrote the wedding vows for a publicity stunt that was done at Shea Stadium when Spider-Man and Mary Jane got married on the pitcher's mound at Shea Stadium, and Stan Lee officiated. So, you know, and I remember sitting there at Shea Stadium in my nosebleed seats while Spider-Man and Mary Jane got married, and, you know, surrounded by already drunk New Yorkers who were just sitting there going, "What the fill in the blank was this shit?"
I love that clip. That's really funny. I think that was our first message board question of that episode, and he just ran with it. Venom65437, I don't know if you're still on the Crawlspace. I haven't seen you in years, but if you are, it would be amazing if you chimed in on chat right now.
Is the message board still a thing?
No, we've moved over to Discord now, Mike.
Okay.
The message board had 20 plus years of content, and it was pulling down the server on the website. So George discovered Discord, and that we've been there ever since. And I don't host Discord, so everybody can go over, and it's essentially a message board is what it is. So
that is very true.
Yeah, no doubt. Anyway, 2007, that was when he took over the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man run, if memory serves correctly. And that was episode 6 of the podcast. So he was, one thing I liked about him.
It was a little before that, because it was before Civil War that he was on that book.
Was it, help me out, chat. Was it Friendly Neighborhood? I thought it was Friendly Neighborhood.
Friendly Neighborhood was like 2005, because that's when they did the whole, what was that storyline called? Where
The Other.
Which kicked off the title, and then he was. It was a big part of the Spider-Man and Civil War stuff. It was actually,
right,
in my opinion, some of the best Spider-Man from Civil War.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But one thing I think you'd agree about Peter David, he was very fan friendly. He did not mind going on an early podcast. What's this thing called a podcast? Yeah, I'll do it. He gave me his phone number. We called up on Skype, and I connected him on the phone. We recorded the audio. I went out in the late 90s to the Chicago Comic-Con, got an autograph, talked to him for a little bit as he was doing that. Just a very friendly, personable guy from my experience. You've interacted with him a few times over the years. You've been on panels with him.
It's he was part of my Dragon Con experience.
Right.
Every year I would have something new, usually one of the Visionary Hulk books. And then when they started doing the Epic collections to kind of fill out his run, I would get those signed. And it was just, it was just part of my stop. I had to do this, and every year I had to get something signed by Peter David. One of the best interactions on that was I had, do you remember Comic Scene from the late 80s?
Yeah, I didn't subscribe to it as much as I did Comic Buyer's Guide, but Comic Scene I remember, yeah. It was like
So-
Starlog.
Yeah, so there was an
Yeah.
earlier version of that in like 1982, 1983, and Peter David did an article about the direct marketplace for Comic Scene. And I found the article. I'm like, hey, I always like to bring something interesting to sign. And he lit up when he saw it, because that article led to him getting hired by Carol Kalish to become in the marketing department at Marvel, because he interviewed her, and then she turned around and kind of interviewed him for the position. So yes, he was usually very friendly. The thing about Peter is that, and this isn't saying anything out of turn, he could be prickly at times, but most of the time it was very positive, and being on panels with him was especially important to me, because this is one of my favorite writers, and here I am moderating him. And the last one was great. It was a DC in the 90s panel.
Okay.
And it was him, it was Daryl Banks, it was like a couple other people. And I always open up a question before I go to the audience, and I'm like, what was working at DC like in the 90s? And he put the microphone in front of me. He said, in front of him, and said, "It sucked." And then and then put the microphone back. And then he gave a more thorough answer. But I was just like, "Yep, that's Peter."
The very first time I saw him was in the late 90s at the Chicago Comic-Con convention, and he was on a panel with Harlan Ellison.
Oh.
And those two worked the room, and I never, it was like Laurel and Hardy. It was like a comedy act. And I laughed so hard. I mean, it must have been 95 when What Savage Beast came out. One of the lines I still remember this day, he goes, Harlan, if I wrote this with She-Hulk, it'd be called What Savage Breast? And those two were just absolutely hysterical together. So,
I got to see them sing "Sit Down, You're Rocking the Boat" at Dragon Con, like 2004, 2005. I forget which one. They all start to blend after a while.
Yeah.
In the
that's
early days.
You and I are getting old. That's why.
How dare you, sir? But on the other hand, yes.
Yes. But yeah, he was a showman at conventions. I just watched the Peter David versus Todd McFarlane debate from '93 on YouTube last night. And
why did Todd take his shirt off? What was what aggro bull is that?
I think both of us are pretty good speakers, and I would not want to verbally, I can't even say the word verbally, and I would not want to spar with Peter David about that. I don't know why Todd would take that fight, man.
Because he's Todd McFarlane. And it was, I honestly think that was one of those things where Todd, and I can't speak for Todd because I don't know the man,
right.
But I think he took that as a challenge, as just another instance of a publicity stunt almost. Because he knew he wasn't going to win.
No. Well, he had to do something. So taking his shirt off and neither one of us are taking a shirt off at a convention. I'll tell you right now.
No, I'm not taking my shirt off now. I'm not, much less a convention.
I don't shower naked. No, I'm just kidding.
Fair.
Hey, I was going to put it on private chat. Do you have a little button? Because you're keying out your green shirt, it looks like. Is there a key on your webcam? It looks like you're keying it. I'm assuming that's a green shirt.
It is a green shirt.
Yeah.
But am I? Oh, that's funny.
You're see-through. I don't know if there's a button on your webcam or something.
No, I don't think I can.
Okay.
I can change that.
Okay.
So it looks like it's
right.
a webbed. So it's a webbed Hulk shirt. So that's the thing.
Okay.
I didn't think of the green
it.
would be a problem, but apparently it is.
I think there's a green screen key or something on your webcam.
Let me see what I got.
But anyway,
you can talk while I try to figure that out.
I like you being transparent. No, just kidding. It makes you honest. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, we were talking about the debate. Todd McFarlane's debate was about he thought Peter David was a little unfair to him in his opinion column, is what I remember that debate to be about. And Comic Buyer's Guide, one of the main reasons I subscribed to that from like God, what was it? 1988 till it folded as a magazine was Peter David's But I Digress column. This is pre-internet. I love that column. Did you pick up Comic Buyer's Guide also?
Because of that, a friend of mine had lent me a collection of his columns.
Yeah.
And that really was like the final catalyst to get me to start like checking out his work more and more. That's definitely what got me to buy his entire run of the Hulk. But I was a regular buyer of Comics Buyer's Guide from like 1997 to about pretty much when it folded.
Yeah, same.
When it turned into a magazine, which
it was not the same when it went from a newspaper to a magazine. It was pre-internet, like we said, and it was just like getting a regular newspaper, only filled with comic news. And so I loved his column. There's 2 trades of it if you want to search it on eBay or something like that. One, But I Digress, and the second one is More Digressions, I think is what it's called. So, but those are really cool. One of my absolute favorite Peter David stories was one of his first, and researching this story, Amazing Spider-Man number 267, came out 40 years ago this year, 1985. And this, I think, for all intents and purposes, was essentially a filler story. And the fact that DeFalco and friends were on it, and they needed something in between the months to fill. So this issue and another one where it had Frogman and the Toad in it. This was Peter David's first work on some of his first work ever on Spider-Man. Also, one of his best. Like, talk about him and Shea Stadium knocking this out of the park. Here Cometh the Commuter is essentially Spider-Man chases a crook into the suburbs and he can't swing from anywhere. And I had a chance to talk to him about this on a podcast. And now this one was from 2021. So this was a recent, has video with it when I talked to him. So let's take a listen of Peter David talking about Here Cometh the Commuter. I suspect, and I don't know if it's true, but when the Spider-Man Homecoming, he goes to the suburbs, and I thought of this story where he can't swing. Did you think they got that from this issue too?
I have no idea if they got it from that issue. I mean, I know where I got the idea.
No, tell me about that.
Back in the day, we had costumed actors.
Mm-hmm.
We had actors who wore various character costumes. Mm-hmm. One of them was Jonathan Frakes.
Oh, as Captain America.
Captain America.
Yeah.
And there was one day where the actor who usually plays Captain America, for all I know is Frakes, was walking around in the Spider-Man costume.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, boy, Spider-Man's costume looks really stupid when he's just walking around. Because if you look at the comic books, he's usually in a crouch or sticking to something.
Mm-hmm.
He's very rarely just walking around with his shoulders swinging.
Right.
And I thought to myself, what would happen if Spider-Man was somewhere where all he could do was walk? He'd probably feel pretty freaking stupid.
Yeah.
And that prompted the Commuter Cometh story, in which he winds up having to go to the suburbs in pursuit of a bad guy. And he's walking around in his Spider-Man costume. And, of course, people are looking at him going, I wonder who that guy in the Spider-Man costume is. Because if you're walking around, there's no way to let people know that you're who you dressed up to be.
Exactly. And it was funny to see that on film where he was shooting webs and they were going nowhere into the sky. I mean, it's perfect visual.
It really is. I mean, I can't say for sure that they got it from my comic book, but they might have.
Right. I don't know if you've ever seen the video. There was a YouTuber that put that story they animated the panels, and he had some voice actors do it. And my daughter played the little girl here. And
that little girl is my daughter, Shayna.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, my daughter,
I put her name in there. Yeah.
That's awesome. My daughter voiced her when they animated it, and the guy had me do this guy.
Oh, great.
And my
Now I
wife,
gotta look this thing up.
I'll send you the thing on email. And my wife voiced the blonde, the wife.
Oh, okay.
Where it was kind of, we just got in front of the mic and we all sent the audio files to the animator. It was Thwip Studios on YouTube, and I'll send that to you. It was fun.
Link.
It was really fun. But that was one of my all-time favorite Spider-Man stories. And
Oh, fantastic.
So
yeah, I mean, I actually sent the artist reference on the little girl on the big wheel. I mean, that was my daughter Shayna. It looked just like her.
I thought that was so cool that he named the little girl after his daughter. My daughter got to voice the little character, so I thought that was a fun little moment. Do you have fond memories of that story?
I love that story. I've read it
a
bunch of times over the years. Back in, like I said, back in the 90s, I made a go of trying to collect like every Peter David comic. And so there's like a solid run of like Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, and then there's a smattering of Amazing Spider-Man issues. But yeah, no, that it was quintessential Peter David writing in that you had, a villain that wasn't like your typical like world beater. He was a dude that lived in the suburbs and, had a normal life, had a wife he went home to every night. And there's Peter having to deal with the neighborhood watch and being sexually harassed by people. And one of my favorite bits is like him constantly having to like walk away and count to 10 because he's just so frustrated.
Yes. And Irv and Shayna, and I can't remember the wife's name, but that really was one of the very first laugh out loud, because I was 10 in 1985, and that was one of the first laugh out loud comics. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely hysterical. And there's several creators in my young comic reading that you're like, I wonder who wrote this. So you go to the comics page and you're like, Peter David, interesting. And then another creator that sparked my eye was John Romita Jr. when he was on with Roger Stern and on Amazing. I'm like, I love this art style. Who he's still on the book today. But I mean, was Peter David also one of yours that you took notice of when you were younger? You're like, I need to know who this is.
Sadly, no.
Okay.
I do remember he wrote a special right after DC's Invasion event in 1988, 1989, and it was called Blasters. Okay. And it was, I almost said Rick Jones, but it's not Rick Jones because Rick Jones is Marvel.
I don't think it's Rick James either. No,
it's the Rick Jones of the DC universe. God, what was his name? He was the sidekick to the Justice League, and it was him.
Remember, I'm a Marvel guy. You're not going to get it out of me. I don't
know. No, I'm really upset that I can't remember this name, but it was just basically a collection during the Invasion story.
Snapper Car.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Venkman.
Yeah.
But during the Invasion storyline, like these aliens kidnapped like a smattering of humanity, like a large group of humans. Basically, they were trying to figure out why humans have so many superpowered beings, and they open fire on them, and there's only like 10 of them that survive. One of them was Snapper Carr, and the blasters were that collection of people brought together because now they all have superpowers. And there was a Hulk joke in it that I clocked, and I was at the time not aware that he was writing the Hulk, but nice. I remembered that because I thought it was kind of funny. And like every once in a while I'd pick up an issue of the Hulk that he was writing and I'd like it, but we're like evil opposites. I was a DC guy. So
yeah,
as much as I loved the Hulk, but it really wasn't until the mid 90s, by the, when I was more of an adult that I really clocked his name and then just tried to follow it everywhere.
Yeah. His next major book that got attention Spider-Man wise was The Death of Gene DeWolff. Again, came out 85, 86, if memory serves correctly. It was a Spider Satellite title, essentially. It's not the main book, so he had a little bit of leeway to do something in a Spider-Man book. And I will never forget that gunshot at Betty I thought Betty was a goner. I just thought that, and to see Spider-Man so upset, and fighting Daredevil and an emotional Spider-Man, he really proved that he's a writer, and he is being wasted in the sales department, essentially. You know?
Yeah.
You have fond memories of this story also?
I love this story.
Me too.
I love his entire run on Spectacular Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It started off, he did a couple like one-offs, then he did a two-parter with the Wasp. But this was the one, if I'm remembering correctly, Jim Owsley, who was the editor, wanted each of the Spider-Man books to have their kind of their own feel.
Yep.
So, Amazing was the flagship title, so it's going to be the action-packed superhero book. Web of became like Peter as a travel photographer.
Yeah, he went around the world. What was the name of that magazine that the Bugle put? Now, I think.
Now magazine. And
Now magazine, yeah.
This was
Law and Order Spider-Man, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he said it was if Stephen Bochco, who created Hill Street Blues,
Hill Street, yeah,
did a Spider-Man series. So it was more street level. It was grittier. And this story has one of the saddest openings to a comic ever, because it opens on Jean DeWolff, basically her life flashing before her eyes, and then it hits you on the splash page that she's now dead. And absolutely. I wasn't as familiar with Jean DeWolff when I first read it, but I have since gone back and read a lot of Spider-Man from like the early 80s, and she is all over the place. So this was like definitely killing off a major supporting character of that time. Yeah. Back when, Peter Parker's supporting characters lasted more than a writer.
Yes,
that was exactly. Snarky. I apologize.
No, but it's true. I mean, writers tend to like to play with creations that they have made. Hence why we're seeing Joe Kelly bring Itsy Bitsy back into the Spider-Man. Like, we haven't seen Itsy Bitsy in 5, 6, 7 years. And you know what? Why not? And you know what? I can't blame him. If I created a character and I really like it, I'd probably put one of mine in too.
Though, give Peter David props. During his effing Spider-Man run during Civil War, he brought back Deb Whitman for a story.
Absolutely. I love that story.
And it was one of the most like realistic things that would happen. A jilted ex-girlfriend writes a tell-all book.
Absolutely. They're coming. If you ever get famous, they come out of the woodwork. And that. Another one around the same time that came out was this one in Amazing Spider-Man, another filler issue for all intents and purposes. This Man, This Frog. It's with the Toad wants to be a sidekick of Spider-Man, and the Leapfrog says, no, I'm Spider-Man's sidekick. And then Ali Oxney or whatever with the Spider-Man suit and the arm says, no, I'm his sidekick. So they're all fighting to be Robin to his Batman. You remember this one?
Yeah, it's another one of it's kind of like the Commuter issue, in that it's just kind of like an offbeat Spider-Man story in between all of the stuff. Because what issue was that? It was
266. It's right before the Cometh the Commuter.
Yeah, so
266, 267. Yeah.
So this is after the Black Suit saga.
Yeah.
Pretty much came to an end, and before we really get into the death of Ned Leeds and the whole Hobgoblin thing coming to a head. So, from what I understand, there was a lot of chaos in the Spider-Man offices at that time. So I'm not surprised that there was more fill-ins than that he got to do.
Yeah, I agree. We were talking about the death of the Hobgoblin. He wrote this issue, which 289, which reveals kinda Ned Leeds is the killer. I mean, not the killer, the Hobgoblin. I had Peter David on again back in 2021, sorry, and he explained the chaos of making this story. Let's take a listen.
We had a Spider Writer meeting.
Okay.
In which we were going to decide who was going to be the Hobgoblin, because Roger Stern was leaving the books. And Roger had wanted it to be Roderick Kingsley, an idea that absolutely none of us liked.
Okay.
So as the writers, we got together and we decided that Ned Leeds was going to be the Hobgoblin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Tom, who was writing Amazing Spider-Man at the time, was going to take the lead in laying the groundwork for Ned Leeds being the Hobgoblin. So one day I'm in my office and Jim Owsley comes over and he says, "You're going to be writing the issue that reveals who the Hobgoblin is, and we're going to go out to lunch and I'm going to tell you." And I said, "It's Ned Leeds." And he said, "We're going to lunch." And I went, "Okay." And Jim says to me, "It's going to be the Foreigner." Now, the Foreigner was an assassin character that I had created. I said, "It can't be the Foreigner." I said, first off, it's completely contrary to his character to be a disguised supervillain. And second, we've been saying for ages that the Hobgoblin is secretly someone who's been around for years. I only introduced the Foreigner a year ago.
No, yeah.
It can't be the Foreigner. I said, "It's Ned Leeds." And he says, "It can't be Ned Leeds." I said, "Why?" He says, "I'm killing off Ned Leeds." I went, "What?" "Yeah." He says, "Yes, in a Spider-Man Wolverine one-shot." I said, "Why in the name of hell are you killing off Ned Leeds?" He says, "To piss off DeFalco."
Oh, good grief.
And I go, "You can't do this. I mean, we cannot do this story." And he says, "It's already written and drawn." And I'm going, "Oh my God."
No.
And I said, "It can't be." And he says, "Okay, well, come up with somebody else." And I go and I reread Tom's work, trying to figure out who could be other than Ned Leeds. And I come to the conclusion that it can't be anybody except Ned Leeds, which is why 99% of the letters we got said, "I bet Ned Leeds is the Hobgoblin." The remaining 1% said, "He can't be the Hobgoblin. It's too obvious." But Tom had been really thorough in laying the groundwork for it to be Ned. And I go to Owsley and I say, "Look, do we show Ned Leeds dying?" And he says, "No." Peter returns to his apartment and finds Ned dead and tied to a chair. And I said, "Okay. Have we got somebody who was a villain who fought the Hobgoblin and got his ass kicked?" And he said, "Yes. My God. I'm like Jack-o'-lantern."
Okay, yeah.
He's Jack-o'-lantern. And I said, "Okay, here's what we'll do. We'll have it be that Jack-o'-lantern wants the Hobgoblin dead. He goes and hires the Foreigner. The Foreigner is going to know Ned Leeds is the Hobgoblin because he's the Foreigner. He knows this stuff. He's got a thick file on him probably. So the Foreigner's men will show up and kill Ned and take the costume and leave him tied to a chair."
Okay.
And Jim says, "So we're not going to have a final confrontation with the Hobgoblin and the Foreigner and Spider-Man?" And I said, "Right." I said, "Here's the advantage. Until we do the reveal for the next 5 months, Ned Leeds will go from being the person that everybody thinks is the Hobgoblin to the person that everyone is convinced could not possibly be the Hobgoblin." Because we wouldn't kill off a Hobgoblin before being a final confrontation with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And Jim says, "Everyone's going to hate it." And I'll say, "Yeah, but we have no choice. And at least it will be unprecedented. And no one will ever do anything like it again." It's going to be the most memorable reveal ever.
Yeah.
And he thought about it. He said, "Okay, let's do it." And that was exactly what we did. And the fan reaction was, as I figured, they hated it.
They hated it.
I think people still hate that.
They still hate that. But you know what? He's a young writer. This is I had it up. What year is this? This is 87. Yep. He's got 2 years under his belt, and he's handed a book by the editor and says, "Do this." And a normal person would do this. He has to take all the puzzle pieces if he wants to work in comics and make it work. And I think he did. He did he did what the best he could. He knew people were going to hate it. He called it. and the people hated it. I remember being disappointed about that too. You also?
To be fair, I came to this much later. So I think by the time I came to this, Stern had written that limited series. Or was it a one shot?
Hobgoblin Lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a mini. Yeah.
So it was one of those things. I do remember it was an expensive issue to buy. It was a wall book at the comic shop I was going at the time. Back, when wall books were a thing. I'm sure they still are, but it seems mostly that they're like either first appearances or Silver Age books now. But this was one of the more expensive back issues I had to buy in the late 90s to fill out my Peter David collection. And I remember reading it, and you got to understand, my experience with Spider-Man at that point was very, very limited. So I didn't really know who Ned Leeds was. I know who Ned Leeds is now. I mean, he was the guy that stole Betty away from Peter, right? I mean, no, I'm just kidding. And then, Peter slept with his wife, so that's okay.
I remember during that interview, I told him, "Hey, did you know Ned Leeds is back, Peter?" He goes, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, he knocked up Betty Brant." He goes, "What?" I'm like, "He crawled out of the grave. He's back, dude." He was like, "Comics."
Yeah, there's nothing you can
do. I mean, come on. But
it was disappointing for you when you read it back in the day.
Well, there was a lot of buildup, and it just wasn't what I thought. And I guess I did like that Roger Stern many years later, but it just didn't seem that big of a payoff. I don't know, but alas.
Well, you are rather easygoing as a Spider-Man fan, to be fair. You are you remain somewhat positive. At least that was my memory of our interactions.
I try to stay positive.
Hating it.
But the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, if you go back to that podcast recently, I gave some of those book Fs. They just padded so much out, and for $5 a book, for $5 a book, I don't want pad, except unless it's Peter David. See what?
Yeah, I was about to say unless it's Peter Allen David.
Exactly. Hey, if you and I didn't love Superman and Spider-Man so much, we would do a Hulk podcast for sure.
Oh yeah,
I guarantee it.
No doubt, man. Like,
yes,
seriously. I keep having people ask me to do one, so it's
Hulk is my second favorite character, and he's also your second favorite character, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
right?
Tied with Batman, because I can't separate the two. But for a while, I put him at number 3, and then I realized that's not at all the case. And the reason why he went from being like one of my favorite characters as a kid to one that is with me now when I'm about to turn 50 next year is Peter David.
Yeah.
His run is what turned me around.
I remember getting this issue in the mail back when you had a subscription to Marvel Comics, and they arrived in the mailbox like a Playboy. Not that I got Playboys when I was 10, but you remember the cardboard? Did you have a subscription to comics?
I have
arrived in the post office.
Very brief. This is gonna make you laugh. It was for the real Ghostbusters series from Now Comics.
Okay.
Because it was a cereal premium. Like, I got like the Ghostbusters cereal because it was the summer of '89. So Ghostbusters 2 was out.
Ghostbusters 2. Yeah.
And for like 6 months, I got the Ghostbuster comic in the mail. And yes, it came in a brown wrapper with a piece of cardboard in it.
I didn't even get the cardboard. I had tape on the end of the cardboard, and I'm amazed some issues arrived folded, some arrived barely there. But I remember getting that one in the mail, and I saw that cover that's still homaged to this day with the Hulk and the Wolverine claws. Hell, Todd McFarlane made a figure of this.
Yes, he did.
McFarlane Toys recently. This was in the Deadpool Wolverine movie.
Yes, it was.
And in researching this show, I saw that Peter David asked Todd, "What do you want? What do you want to draw?" And he said, "I want to draw Wolverine." And so that's why Wolverine is in this book. So it's a very memorable, and if memory serves, they hadn't met since Hulk 181, Wolverine's first appearance. And I think this was during the Mutant Massacre, I think.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but yeah.
Yeah, that was during Mutant Massacre.
Yeah.
No, it was the one after Mutant Massacre.
The Fall of the Mutants.
Fall of the Mutants. Yeah,
Fall of the Mutants. Yeah,
because the X-Men were on the run.
Yeah, they ended up in Australia. Yeah.
Yes, but they were trying to get to Dallas, and this was like a stop-off where the Hulk and Wolverine have an encounter. If I'm remembering correctly, too, Todd gave him that cover. The original.
Oh, wow. Wow. That'd be an awesome.
Back when they got along.
Yeah, I know. But the team up of these two, this writer and artist, what didn't last long. But along with my love of Peter David, I got a love of Todd McFarlane based on his Hulk. And when I found out he's going to Amazing Spider-Man, I'm like, whoa, this is going to be incredible. Well, it was going to be
amazing more than incredible.
It's going to be amazing and incredible. But I love the Gray Hulk. I love the snarkiness, which is instead of with the green, you get the Hulk smash, one syllable Hulk, but you get Joe Fixit and the Vegas and just so much fun. So much fun, these early issues.
The thing about his run on the Hulk is that the only constant was change. So
Absolutely.
You'd get into like the McFarlane issues are basically him on the run with Clay Quartermain and Rick Jones in a battle van trying to track down gamma weapons that the government had been stockpiling, and they were being chased by the Leader, or as if you watch the 90s animated series, the Leader. And then you have the Vegas era, and then you have like a small period where he's kind of on the run again, and then you have the Pantheon, and then you have the fall of the Pantheon, and you have they're on the run again, and then finally you have the year, you have the year where the Hulk and Bruce were separated.
Because the Heroes Reborn,
And then he brings General Ross back, and the Hulk's at Gamma Base again. So it was just like you never, like once you got settled into something, he pulled the rug out and completely changed everything. And I think that's why that run works so well, is because it never got stale.
He reboots himself. He puts himself in a new situation for him as a writer to explore what the Hulk's doing. My favorite is the Gary Frank stuff, where he's battling the gray and the green. That's my favorite part of his run.
Wasn't that Dale Keown?
Dale Keown and Gary Frank together, they blend to me.
Yeah,
that
they do part, because they were both artists during the Pantheon era, so that's fair.
Yeah, but my least favorite is when he got a house with Betty in the suburbs, and Liam Sharp took over for art. I didn't like that one, and he was playing baseball at one point. Like I like my Hulk a little pissed.
Oh, come on, that was him doing the Casey at Bat parody.
I know, but yeah. I mean, with any writer that you like, there's going to be stuff you don't like. I imagine.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say not so much Liam Sharp, but Angel Medina.
Medina, yeah.
That was the era that I was least connected with, because I just didn't like his style. It's nothing with everything with comic book art. It's like these guys have a lot of talent, but I just don't like what they're doing. It's nothing against their talent. It's just a personal preference. But the thing about it, though, is that without that era, you don't get the setup for what Savage Beast. But what Savage Beast keys into what I think is Peter David's greatest contribution to the Hulk, which was the Maestro as a character. Yes. I love anything involving the Maestro.
I did too. Did you read his last 3 Maestro miniseries?
I did, and I loved them.
I did too.
I was just like, when I saw that he was doing those, I got so excited because I haven't really collecting. Like I buy the Superman books obviously because I'm contractually obligated to at this point. But,
exactly.
But yeah, when I saw that he was doing it, I'm like, I've got to pick these up. I was buying them digitally, and then I would get the trades to have on my shelf. But I remember my wife laughed so hard. The Hulk Smash animated series that was on Disney. Maestro shows up at one point. I was in my little office area, and right outside that is where our TV is. And I hear the Maestro show up, and my wife hears from the other room, "That's bad. That's really bad. This is going to go really, really bad, really, really fast. Everybody needs to get out of there right now.
Yeah, we're talking about the What Savage Beast. 1995, if memory serves, this came out. There was a Prose line of Marvel books, and this was a hardcover. Came out. I haven't read it in 30 years. I need to read it again. But I remember loving it. Oh, let's talk about that a little bit. During that 2021 interview, he was shocked that I showed him that this was books that they're on Audible, that they had voice actors. And we can talk a little bit about this. I think there's several experiences I've had with Peter David, and he's surprised that this stuff is coming out, and why Marvel hasn't given him a heads up or a check or something. It saddens me a little bit. One example is the audiobook. I showed it to him live on the show in that 2021 interview. He had no idea. Several of his books have become audiobooks. I looked through our past interactions on Facebook. When the Hulk with the bunny slippers and the guns was a Funko Pop, I said, man, you got to get this. And he had no idea. Marvel didn't give him a heads up. There was a Spider-Man 2099 Funko Pop. He had no idea. I told him that the Avengers video game on the PS5 came out and the Maestro was in it. He was a boss. He had no idea. So I guess we can have a deeper conversation about this, about what does a company owe a guy that's a free agent? I mean, it should be more than what he was given.
I fully agree with that. I had a similar experience with the writer Kevin J. Anderson, telling him that his Superman Batman novel Enemies and Allies was turned into a graphic audio production, and he had no idea. And it's great. I promised myself I was not going to get onto the soapbox of the evil soulless corporations who suck the energy out of people.
I mean, this is a bigger conversation about healthcare.
Yeah.
This is about I mean, that's a big. This is. I mean that. What are the people that are in charge? Are there people that are hired to support the platform that you've built? I don't think there are. I don't think there are people that say
they don't care.
Yeah.
They don't. Yeah. And on one hand, I'm glad that Marvel is putting out their Prose books in audio form, because I remember loving them, and it's great hearing them again. Yeah. But it really sucks that the writers of those books don't get anything, even a heads up that it exists.
I agree. It's just so sad on that.
I had a kind of one of my more pleasant conversations with Peter was about What Savage Beast, and at that time Graphic Audio had the Marvel license, and they were also doing productions of Sir Apropos of Nothing, his fantasy book series. And I asked him, I go, do you think they would want to do What Savage Beast? Because it seems to me like a perfect book for that platform. And he told me he would talk to them about it. Obviously, it didn't happen. But I think it is deplorable on every level that a company that uses their IPs to generate billions in profits for the company. We're talking about a man that created Miguel O'Hara, the Spider-Man 2099, who was the bad guy in the second Spider-Verse film.
Yeah.
That was extremely successful. And, I think it was Ed Brubaker says he gets more money from the residual check from his cameo in Winter Soldier than he does for Winter Soldier as a character.
Wow.
And this is one of those times where I have absolutely no fear or reticence of saying something. It sucks. It's wrong on every level, because you're talking about pennies when you're making billions. Like giving Peter David a free copy of because I bought the What Savage Beast on CD, giving him a free copy of the CD costs you nothing. Giving him a Funko Pop of the Professor Hulk and the bunny slippers doesn't cost you anything. What it will do is it will lead that writer to say, look what I got, and get people to go buy it. So it's not only wrong, it's stupid.
Yeah. I want to go back to what's Savage Beast in a second, but I also want to talk about.
I want to calm Mike down a little bit too.
No. We're still going to talk about this topic. I want to definitely also share this. The healthcare ran out for him.
Yeah.
I mean, he had to have a couple GoFundMe sites because his healthcare ran out. It's just crappy all the way around. What happened to that? Their creators, and by the way, they are still doing donations. His wife is still needing help to pay for medical bills. So if you want to go right here, GoFundMe.com, and it's under. I'll put a link in this video in just when I post it. But please go there and help out his family who are grieving, and still the bills are still coming in. So, but the healthcare, the hey, thanks for making Maestro. Hey, thanks for doing 2099. It's not there, and it makes the companies soulless. And it just really, as a fan, it really ticks me off.
Yeah, and they don't care. That's the other part of it is, I think to become an executive of one of these companies, they put a mirror in front of you to see if you have a reflection. And if you do, you're out. I know that they can do creative accounting to say that they didn't make money off of something, but come on, you're putting a character in a video game, you're putting a character in a movie, you're animating the character for the Hulk smash, Hulk and the Agents of Smash. Excuse me, I've been saying the name of the show wrong.
I didn't watch it. I couldn't.
And you can't cut a dime. I mean, Joey Z in the chat, Jim Starlin got money for KG Beast getting name checked in Batman v Superman, but he doesn't get anything for Thanos. He was in Endgame in the scene with Steve Rogers at the beginning, but he doesn't get any money for the character.
I don't know how it works because you do see at the credits it says thanks to Peter David, thanks to Stanley. I don't know if they write him a check. I think it's just credits at the end. There's no money exchanged.
There was a point, and I don't know if it's still the case, but basically if you were working at DC from 1976 to 1997 and you co-created a character, you would get financial compensation when it was used in another medium. Jerry Conway, another Spider-Man writer, was able to take his family to Europe on the money he got for one of the Arkham games using Killer Croc. But he has never received anything for the Punisher. And it's one of those things where if they don't legally have an obligation, they're not going to do it. And they will say, well, this sets a precedent. And says, yeah, it sets a precedent. It sets a precedent that these characters didn't just spring into existence. Your people didn't come up with them. They were created by people who were essentially independent contractors, unless you had a contract, like a exclusive writing contract with a company. But even then, it's sketchy. And you're saying you can't give Peter David's family, you can't just write them a check out of the billions you have in your coffers to take care of their expenses. No, they have to go to their readers and the fans to do that. And it's just, it's not only deplorable, it's offensive and it's evil.
Yeah. Let's go back to what we love. Which is Peter David's writing.
Thank you for letting me get that out of my system.
No problem.
I've been thinking about it a lot in the last couple of days.
This book, 95, that makes this book 30 years old.
Yes.
Which is absolutely crazy. I need to reread it because I've lost a lot of memory of what the story was about, but I remember loving it. And spoiler alert, I think Betty's pregnant in this book. I think she's pregnant. I think Talbot dies. I think Talbot, a relative of Talbot, comes back. Give me a little summary of what this book's about for the people who have not read it. This book is older than some of the people watching.
what I will say before I do that is one of the greatest things about this book is that I was not familiar with just about any part of Peter David's run on the Hulk, and I was never lost once in this book. He brings you up to speed. This is taking place after the fall of the Pantheon, and Peter and Betty, Peter and Betty, thinking of Betty Brand, Bruce and Betty are on the run. And Matthew Talbot, who is Glenn Talbot's nephew, pops up, and he wants to go after him. And meanwhile, this doctor pops up on Doc Samson's doorstep to say, "I think I can cure him." And things get really complicated because Betty is now pregnant. And so Bruce has like this whole impetus to get cured so that they can have a normal life. And this doctor cures him, but I don't even know if I want to spoil this part because it's so good. The doctor turns out to be something other than the doctor, and the back half of the book is basically a sequel to Future Imperfect. And it is such an amazing book. And part of it takes place in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which I was living next to at the time the book came out. So there was a part of me that was like really excited about that. I know where that is. And this is the key to Marvel Comics. But more than anything, the plot is great. It's just the way he writes these characters. Doc Samson is great. Talbot's great. Betty, I think if any writer alive got Betty Banner right, it was Peter David. He is the one that took her from being the shrinking violet of the Stan Lee and other eras and made her a strong, independent character. Did you read that Last Call special that came out a couple years ago?
Yeah, was a suicide. There was a suicide. She was on a suicide prevention hotline or something like that.
Yeah, she worked there during the Pantheon era, so that's where it took place. But no, it's such a great book. Like, it gets to the heart of who the Hulk is. There's lots of funny references. There's references to the television show.
Yeah, Joey Z says Jack McGee has a cameo. I forgot Jack McGee was in it.
He was in it, and Doc Strange gives him gallstones. So
there was I think you put on Facebook or one of your videos that you put out that you talked to him, and he revealed something at the end of the book because it played in with Les Mis. And talk about that story. Yeah. So
if you're not familiar with the musical or the story of Les Mis, one of the characters is Inspector Javert. He's the one hunting Jean Valjean through the course of the musical, and at the end, he realizes that he can't live in this gray area of Jean Valjean helping him, so he commits suicide. So Peter David, through the course of the book, lays in this as kind of some subtext and eventually text for the character of Talbot. Now, he would eventually bring Talbot into the comics during the whole Ghosts of the Future storyline. But at the end, spoiler warning, Talbot commits suicide. Now, I got the Les Mis part, but the very first time I met Peter David in 2001, I'm telling him how much I love the book and that I loved the Les Mis references. And he's like, yeah, like Talbot committing suicide at the end, like Javert. And my wife still laughs about this because the look
it's like a 2x4.
Yeah. Like the look on my face was a mix of shock and somewhat embarrassment because I should have seen it, but he was very pleasant about the whole thing. But that's one of my favorite Peter David memories.
He, like we talked about earlier, the Prose Marvel stuff in the mid-90s was epic. I loved it. One of the first books was a short story, Brian Michael Bendis, Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yes.
This has a bunch of short stories in it. And one of my all-time favorites is a Peter David. And I will show you this. I've got the book right here for reference. In the 90s, I went up and asked him to sign it. So he signed it right there. If you look, he put little spider eyes inside of the D on David. And the story that he wrote in this, he did 2 of them. But the one I like, and I just read it last night, and I haven't read it in 30 years, was a story called 5 Minutes.
Yep.
And he signed that for me there, too, with great Rick Leonardi art, who he also teamed up with on Spider-Man 2099. The story of 5 Minutes is they're newlyweds, essentially. Peter and Mary Jane. They just recently married. Mary Jane is tired of the universe taking Spider-Man away from her. They wanted some time alone. And when they're doing what newlywed things they do, and Spider-Man hears an ambulance go down and some cops, etc. And he was like, I should go. And a very smoking hot redhead says, no, stay. And he goes, I gotta go. And just give me 5 minutes. So she gives him 5 minutes. And then he gets out on the scene. He finds out this guy jumped to his death from a building. And the police officer or the fireman says, if you would have been here 5 minutes ago, we would have saved him. You could have saved him. And that he had flashbacks of, the burglar running by, all the guilt that comes with Spider-Man. And Mary Jane and him fight a little bit. Mary Jane, he essentially blames Mary Jane in a roundabout way. Like, if you would have let me go, I would have saved this guy. And it's a really, really good short story. And if you haven't read it, it's on Audible too, isn't it? I think they've done this one. I think they've done this one Audible. But also one of the stories that he did, again, because Stan Lee was the editor on this. Peter David and him teamed up for an origin story with some mixes, some twists. Peter David and Stan Lee, from what I heard or understand, this was a manuscript or a potential Spider-Man movie.
Yes.
They were going to...
Stanley wrote a treatment, and that's what he used as the basis of the short story.
Right. So it's a 90s tweak on a Spider-Man movie that Peter David and Stan Lee worked, and you can read it. It's a little bit different than Amazing Fantasy 15. So if you haven't checked it out, please do so. You have fond memories of that book too.
Oh, I love that book. And I remember reading that origin and thinking this would make a great television series because I apparently aim low. But it also mixes in the origin of Doc Ock. So if you think John Byrne thought of that first for chapter 1, you can read this and see it done better.
Absolutely.
It's that book in particular was like what Savage Beast. It was very important to me at that time. And I was not married when I first read the 5 Minutes story. But when I listened to it on Audible about a year or so back, when I finally got that and I was re-experiencing the book through the audio version, man, it hit me like a ton of bricks because like it is one of the most realistic depictions of a marriage I've ever seen in a comic book story. Like you have those arguments, you have those fights where you say something you regret.
Yep.
Hi, Adam. Sorry, I was looking at the comments.
There he is.
But
by the way, chat, if you would like to ask us some questions about Peter David, share some memories, at the very end of the show, we're going to go through chat. And it's not like I'm ignoring you. We're just going through a few things and we'll hit chat at the very end. Okay.
But I really like it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I'm like, this is what being married for, at that point, like over 20 years or about 20 years is gets you when you read something like this. But I think it just goes to the key of what made Peter David such a great writer is that not only were the stories interesting, not only were they funny, but it's the way he wrote his characters that made you fall in love with the stories. And he was definitely
made him human.
He was definitely, I won't say he was character over plot, but character was probably the most important thing in any of his works.
Absolutely. We can't leave out his co-creation, his big one. We talked about Miguel O'Hara. Spider-Man 2099, #1, launched a whole line of Marvel in the future. Do you have fond memories of this one? I remember picking this up with that red foil cover, just devouring it. I loved it.
I was 16 in the summer of '92, and they were doing the whole 30th anniversary of Spider-Man around that time.
With the holograms.
With the holograms, and I forget which. Did they all have the preview for it? One of them had a preview for this.
It was Amazing 365. Right. I think they saved this one for the big one for Amazing.
Yeah. And then about 2 years later, when I was a senior in high school, one of the guys that sat at my table at lunch, or the table I sat at, it's not like I owned the table. He's like, have you ever read Spider-Man 2099? And I said, no. And the next day he brought me his entire collection. He goes, you've got to read this.
Oh, wow.
And I'll never forget reading it then, and then because he only up to issue 18 at that point. But a couple years later, I read the whole thing again. And when you get to issue 25, there is a revelation that just punched me in the face when it happened. And I'm like, damn, this guy's good.
And you already were a fan of him with his Hulk, etc. I imagine by that,
yeah. By that point, I was, but I love Spider-Man 2099. I love that costume. I love the character. I love that his name is Miguel O'Hara. It's just like everything about. It's why I was kind of mad at the Spider-Verse movie a little bit. I'm like, why are you making him the? Well, it's dramatic and all that, but you're making Miguel the bad guy. Stop it.
Hopefully the next movie they redeem his character a little bit. He's not a bad guy. I fell in love with that whole 2099 line. I picked them all up, even Ravage, 2099. But you know what? Do you know the history of Ravage? What it eventually could have been?
No.
From what I've read, Stan Lee wrote Ravage, and they were like, you know what? You know, it'd be cool to team Stan Lee up with a new universe. Steve Ditko. Steve Ditko took a meeting with Stan Lee and he turned it down. Ravage. And I think that would have been fun. No, but I think Steve Ditko and Stan Lee on Ravage would have been interesting. But alas, it never happened. But
could have been Peter worse than what we actually got. So
I know. But 2099 had a really good run. He came back to that character in the 2000s with Big Time, I think, is what when Dan Slott was writing it.
It was during the Superior Spider-Man thing, and then that spun into a Spider-Man 2099 series.
Yeah, and the very last thing, and correct me, Chad, if I'm wrong, that Peter David put out from Marvel, I don't know about DC, but was Symbiote Spider-Man 2099. And it was his last work, I think, is writing this character, which I guess if you got to go out on one you co-created.
Are those Symbiote Spider-Man series good? I've been thinking about picking them up.
Some of them are better than others. Your mileage may vary on Greg Land art, but it's still Peter David. The one that you would like is called Crossroads, where Spider-Man and he goes to the Mantlo Hulk, where he issue around 300. Black suit in the Crossroads with the Hulk, and they got some dumb Eternals shit in there because the movie was coming out. But take the Eternals out of there. But the rest of it, you're like, oh, that's cool. Another one I don't know if you read. He did a Joe Fixit mini. Where
I have it. I haven't read it yet. I have it on my iPad, as a matter of fact.
That's good. His return to, and again, not everything the writer writes I'm a fan of, but his new Fantastic Four return I didn't really care for. But his Joe Fixit I liked, his Maestro stuff. Most of his Symbiote Spider-Man stuff was really, really fun. So yeah. So pick those up if you haven't read them. We also, what else we got we want to talk about? I have
his
one
DC work, which I mean, this man got you to read DC books.
He did. He made me pick up Supergirl, and I collected the whole run of Supergirl because you got him returning with Gary Frank, and I love Gary Frank's stuff from the Hulk. And I knew nothing about Supergirl except Helen Slater. I mean, that's all I knew about Supergirl, and I liked it. I liked this book a lot. Talk about did you love Supergirl when he was writing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this was when I was all in on the Superman books to begin with.
Right.
And I had been I had just started collecting the Superman books when they introduced the Matrix version of Supergirl, which they didn't introduce as the Matrix version of Supergirl. It was just at the end of Superman number 16, a bunch of scientists in the Arctic uncover the body of Supergirl. And it was like this big shock. But what Peter David did is he took this that version of the character and just basically inverted it and created a whole new character named Linda.
Is she still around? Is she still in the DC universe, or what happened?
No.
Okay.
After, if you read the entire run, she basically quits being Supergirl at the end of it. And goes off. There was a lot of fan talk that she was the character in Fallen Angel, which was Peter David's series after his Supergirl work. And she showed up, or at least the Earth Angel version of Supergirl that Peter David kind of created, showed up in this god-awful miniseries called Rain in Hell around 2009. But no, that's kind of a closed loop when it comes to that character, because he completely redefines her at the end, and then he basically in the beginning, and then he retires her at the end. And
I think 80-issue run, if memory serves,
that kept getting screwed up by crossovers, which I think was, this is going to sound like a terrible pun, that was Peter David's cross to bear. Like,
absolutely.
Like he'd get on a book and they keep hitting him with these crossovers.
The Other, and what else? I mean, Secret Wars 2 even. I mean, come on.
Secret Wars 2, The Other, all of the X-Men crossovers when he was writing X-Factor, which we didn't mention either, is fantastic.
Oh God, X-Factor was great.
On the X-Factor.
Both versions. I think the Madrox is better the second time he visits the character. But let's talk about DC. Well, he also did Young Justice.
Yep.
I read that. I enjoyed it.
That was a good book for you to read too, because you didn't really have to understand who those characters were.
I didn't. Yeah.
He treated them like you were just coming into them, and they. Mm-hmm. It was, some of the humor doesn't land as well as it does. I mean, there's a character in the first issue named Mighty Endowed.
Wouldn't you like to be named that character?
I was about to say, I almost had in my notes, Brad is going to laugh at the name Mighty.
That was not a hard prediction, Karnak. I mean, come on.
But he also, during that run, they did a storyline that became a 5th week event. And for those of you that don't remember 5th week events, one, please, for the love of God, take your ibuprofen after this thing is over so that your knee doesn't hurt in the morning. And two, every once in a while, when a month had a 5th Wednesday, DC would do like an event, like with specials and all that, because normally comics weren't coming out that week. And he did one called Sins of Youth that brought in this concept of old Justice, which were golden age sidekicks coming out against these young kids today with their hula hoops and their Dan Fogelberg records. And in the midst of this giant story where Clarion the Witch Boy, bum, 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 if you've read it, you get that joke, turns all of the teenage heroes into adults and all the adult heroes into kids. And
there's a Star Trek episode of that, I remember.
Yeah, but what it was really talking about was, it was a reaction to Columbine. And the reaction that adults and politicians and social commenters had to the shooting in Columbine, he turned that into a superhero story, and it was really good. It really was. Young Justice is a fun book. It really was.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
He did they had to do a DC 1 million crossover, and all he did
again, poor bastard.
And all he did was just take the piss out of DC's crossovers from the past. So it was just fantastic.
He also wrote, if memory serves, some of the cartoons for Young Justice.
Yep.
Cartoon episodes, yeah.
He did the origin of Secret episode, which was fitting because he wrote that storyline. So
now the one DC book I did not read, mainly because I'm just not, the character doesn't do much for me, but I bet you I'd enjoy it because it's Peter David. He's the one that turned Aquaman and gave him the hook in his hand, right?
Okay, so here's the thing about Aquaman, his run on Aquaman.
Yeah.
If you liked his run on the Hulk, you'll like his run on Aquaman.
Okay.
Because he kind of reconfigures this character, gives him a new purpose, a new outlook, and a new look. And this was 1994. And I don't know if you remember the 90s, Brad, but there was a lot of edgy books on the stands.
Yeah.
And this version of Aquaman had long hair. He had a full beard. In this issue, his hand is eaten off by piranha, and he replaces it with a hook that's a harpoon. But really, if you read the story, it's about a man who lives in two worlds and doesn't really feel like he fits in either one. And through the course of it, it has him exploring Arthur becoming a king again. And he brings in not only brings in old Aquaman characters, he starts bringing in like old aquatic characters from DC's history. And it was just a lot of fun. There are some issues that are better than others, but again, if you liked his Hulk run, you'll like his Aquaman run.
And Peter has been on record for saying the Atlantis Chronicles is his favorite work he's ever done. Yep. I've not read that. Do you like that book?
I haven't read it in like 20 years, but it's something that Aquaman is in the last issue. It is basically Game of Thrones underwater. Is the best way to describe it. It's a vast,
and he finished the book unlike George R.R. Martin.
Fair. And from what I understand, that was supposed to roll into Peter David writing an Aquaman book before the Aquaman book he got on, but office politics, which again was a bane of his existence, meant that somebody else wrote that series. But then in 1993, he wrote the Aquaman Time and Tide miniseries, which was the second time they redid Aquaman's origin in the post-crisis era.
Jeez.
I might add. That's a great story too. I really like it. But his Aquaman run, it's funny when you get deep into his Aquaman run, like around 96, 97, and you get into his Hulk run and you see like all these characters that are kind of lost and wandering. That was really a reflection of what was going on in his life at the time. So it's another thing where if you know the writer, you kind of see where the stories are coming from, but the stories still work well on their own as well.
What's up, Michael McNulty? He says, if you think about it, if we didn't have Peter David's Aquaman, we would have never gotten Momoa as Aquaman because Zack Snyder took a lot of influences from Peter David's take. Interesting.
Yeah, James Gunn said that on social media the other day, that his Aquaman run was hugely influential for the character. And I know a lot of hardcore Aquaman fans that don't like that run for various reasons. And some, are legitimate. Not everybody is going to like every version of a character. So sometimes you have JMS and JRJR, and sometimes you have, the recent 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. So
we're talking about DC and Marvel. He did one of the rare things that not many writers get to do is Marvel versus DC. He wrote issue 2 and 4. I think Ron Mars issue 1 and 3, if memory serves. I think I remember who fought. Did he write Hulk and Superman fighting? Is that what I remember? Or am I just off?
No, I think the fights happened in issue 3. He did write the fight between Aquaman and Namor. If memory serves, where Aquaman drops a whale on him. And then just is really pithy. No, this is okay. So if you want peak 90s, you go no further than Marvel versus DC, DC versus Marvel. However, it's a hell of a lot of fun.
And it's, as a Spider-Man fan, it's unfortunate because it's Ben Reilly in the damn book.
Yeah, but who does he fight? He fights Superboy. What's Superboy? A clone of Superman. So the clone fought the clone.
Straight up 90s. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, but he didn't want to write the first issue because he didn't want to just do the setup.
Oh,
so that's why
heavy
he wrote
lifting.
issues 2 and 4.
I don't blame him on that. Yeah.
But yeah, he also wrote one of my favorite gags of the book. In issue 4, the Mole Man shows up, and the Hulk and Superman are there, and the Hulk says, "Superman versus the Mole Man. This should be a short fight." And it's just this beautiful little gag referencing the Superman and the Mole Man movie from 1951.
Right. That's what I think. Yeah. He, what's that called? No, I forget what that's called. It's a wink, for all intents and purposes. So, let's see. I've got some. Let's just go through some images that I've not shown, and we'll talk about them. We had him on back in 2011, maybe, to talk about this. This was a great book, and I don't know if you've seen it, Mike.
I have.
It's called it's Spider-Man Vault, and inside of it's like Spider-Man collectibles, and they reproduced them inside the book, and it's really, really cool. There's like the Spider-Man wedding poster. There's anyway, a lot of cool things inside that book, which is interesting. They've redid this book with all the text. It's got like a blue cover now. I forget what it's called, but Peter David's name's on it again. But this is the one to get. I like the Vault book a lot.
I'm sure it's available on eBay.
I bet you can. I bet you can find it. I've also got on the shelf, I've got a Marvel Vault book with a bunch of Marvel collectibles in it too. But it was a very fun book. If you've never seen that. What else do I have in this? We talked about that. Edge of Time. He and along with doing comics, he did video games. He wrote the Spider-Man video game Edge of Time, where his co-creation Miguel O'Hara is in this. And this is my last clip of Peter David. We've got him talking about what it was like of creating dialogue for a video game. Again, this is from 2011.
Ranging from having to write what are called wild lines. You know, we need 10 different things for Spider-Man to say when he punches out a guard. We need 15 things for Mary Jane to say when she's in an elevator that's descending downward rapidly and is going to cause her to fall to her death. 15 things other than, oh crap, oh God, I'm in an elevator falling to my death.
That's awesome.
And there's also incredible time constraints. I mean, very specific. They would, for instance, even after I turned in the first draft of the script, I would get back emails that would say things like, okay, Peter, during this sequence, Spider-Man is running to the mutant lab, the mutations lab, and he's in conversation with Spider-Man 2099 during this. It's going to take him 30 seconds to run to the lab. We need you to write a dialogue exchange of 30 seconds in length.
Man.
Not 28 seconds, not 31 seconds, 35 seconds is right out. They need 30 seconds. So it's one thing when I'm scripting a comic book, I have a general idea of how many words I can comfortably get away with in a panel, developed through the long years of doing this. I have no idea how long it takes to say the stuff. So I would have to sit there and write dialogue and then read it aloud with a stopwatch. And if it ran 35 seconds, I had to go back in and trim it down. And if I trimmed it down and it was now 26 seconds, I needed to add a couple of words.
Wow. That would drive me nuts. That probably, I can't imagine that.
Well, in the words of Super Chicken, I knew that the job was dangerous when I took it.
He's used that Super Chicken.
He loves that Super Chicken line.
He loves that Super Chicken line. I've heard it several times from him. I can't imagine being a writer and having to write and time it. Like, what other medium do you have to do that? Comics, well, you've got a limited amount, but you don't have to time the dialogue, etc. And films, you don't have to do that. But that's he stretched a different writing muscle, I think, when he did the video game writing. So I think that was kind of cool.
Yeah, and that's the thing about him is that he didn't just write comics. He wrote novels. He wrote video games. He co-created a TV show called Space Cases with Bill Mumy. He wrote for television, so he wrote movies. I mean, he literally was kind of a Renaissance man.
It was. Here's some more images I've got in this Peter David folder we just referenced. Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, as the last panel of that book is J. Jonah Jameson yelling, "That effing Spider-Man," which is a classic line.
Yep.
And Zach inspired that last issue by one of the interviews. He said, has J. Jonah Jameson discovered that have they had an interaction that he revealed his identity? And Zach asked Peter that, and that spawned a whole issue, which ended up being the last issue. So I thought that was really fun that we had a little part in making that last issue happen. Symbiote Spider-Man. There's the Crossroads book I was talking about. You need to read that, Mike. That one's fun.
Yes.
Also we have, of course, Star Trek New Frontier.
Love that series.
I was going to ask, I don't think you and I've talked much Trek, but you read these?
I read them when they were in the mid-90s, like both Stephen King and Peter David did books that were serialized. They were smaller.
Yeah.
And it was like basically the one novel was released in 4 parts. And it goes back to this tradition from the 1800s of that's how books were released. But both The Green Mile and New Frontier were released in that format. And I loved it. I consider myself a fan of Star Trek. I don't consider myself a Trekkie or a Trekker. I love the Next Gen. I love the movies. I've gotten into original series, but I really need to go back and read his Peter David Star Trek comics, but I loved the New Frontier. Calhoun was such a great captain.
I read those first 4 and maybe the first 2, because I remember they had pictures on the covers what these characters look like on the covers.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I stopped after like issue 6. And I think about 2 or 3 years ago, I got a new iPad. And I'm like, oh, let's try this Kindle thing. And who did I search for? I searched for Peter David. And all those New Frontier books you can download them and you can buy them. And I am currently on book 13.
Wow.
So over the last several years, you lay down at night, grab your iPad, you're going to read something. I often find myself reading the New Frontier books, and they're awesome. They're mainly all new characters created from him, with the exception of Captain Shelby.
Yep.
And you also have Mrs. Roddenberry's character from the first, and Robin Leffler, who is Ashley Judd, is in the books. Anyway, if you haven't read New Frontier, if you're a Trekkie, even if you're not a Trekkie, you can pick these up. They're a lot of fun. So another book which I've read and 30 years ago and loved it, and from research, evidently it's the best-selling Trek novel of all time. It's called Imzadi.
Yeah.
And I said to him on an interview, because I heard an interview with Marina Sirtis, who plays Counselor Troy. She said she's only read one book that's a Star Trek novel, and it's this one, and she loved it. And I told Peter David that on the air in the most recent podcast, and he loved that idea. The Guardian of Forever is at the very top, which is a classic Harlan Ellison.
Yep.
Co-creation or creation. There's a long story with that one.
Yes.
But it's about the love affair between Troy and Riker. If you like that, check that book out. I don't have an image of it, but Q Squared.
Yep. Where
Q and Mrs. Troy battle, if you will. That's a fun book. A lot of good Star Trek from him. He hit 3 areas of my biggest fandom, which is Spider-Man, Hulk, and Star Trek. I mean, the guy, it's like he's writing specifically for me. I mean, you probably agree.
I would definitely agree. I would also agree that if you ever want to read a good novelization of any movie, read Peter David's. He did the novelization for Batman Forever. It's amazing.
And the Spider-Man. He did all 3 Spider-Man Sam Raimi books. And I'm not sure this is much of a thing anymore. I don't think they do.
No, not really.
I used to see him at Walmart and bookstores all the time. But he did all 3 of the original Spider-Man novels. I think he added a little bit to it. I remember reading the first one, and he's going off a script that isn't what they actually filmed, because they have to do this like a year or so in advance, is what I understand.
He tends to do that too. Like the Batman Forever novelization, he adds like a bunch of stuff at the beginning that sets up the characters. that were not in the original scripts. So the thing, also one of my favorite stories of Peter David is he was talking on Facebook at one point that he found a file on his computer and he didn't know what it was, and it was just titled "This Script Sucks," and he opened it up. He opened it up, and it was the Ang Lee 2003 Hulk movie, which he wrote the novelization for. And he wrote the one for the 2008 one too, and Rocketeer, Return of Swamp Thing.
Oh wow, wow.
So yeah,
Man.
I know. I just
check those out. Yeah, he had Spider-Man team up with his co-creation here for a team up. 2099 meets regular Spider-Man. I remember reading that one. That one was fun. He also did, I think, chat, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was his last ongoing series. He did a lot of minis. The Scarlet Spider ongoing. I remember he said Mark Bagley drew a face where you could see the mouth on the Scarlet Spider, and fandom said no. So they were like, let's go with the classic. We're not going to redesign this suit. Even though it's a hoodie that's been ripped to hell, this is what the fans of the 90s want back. So
that's another one I've been meaning to get to, just because it's both Peter David and Mark Bagley, who I have since come to realize is my favorite Spider-Man artist.
It's a thing. It's one of those. It's a thing. I wouldn't highly recommend it. I at the last issue specifically, I know it ticked Zach off, and it's cloned, so I could give two damns. But it's not my favorite. And even I bet you Peter David is like, you know what? It's Ben Reilly. But we talked about that. We talked about Aquaman. I remember mailing off this comic, which for UNICEF, if you mailed off and got this comic, it was The Trial of Venom that he wrote. This is back when Venom was printing gold. Anytime Venom appeared, Peter David did this one. Remember the foil on the cover?
That's in one of the Venom Epic collections too.
Yeah. Here's the cover of that 5-minute story that I absolutely love. Good Rick and Leonardi. And here, let's talk about this. Let's end on this, and we'll go to comments from chat. If you have any questions for Mike and I, we will read them now, and I'm going to scroll through some comments, etc. But this issue has Spider-Man and Hulk in it. Of course, you and I are going to love it. You want me to do the setup of what this issue is about?
Yeah, go ahead, because it's interesting.
Okay. I read it recently, so I loved it. It's one of his early issues. And what I love about it is Peter David is teamed up with Sal Buscema, who had a great run, one of my all-time favorite Hulk writers. Spider-Man wakes up and he's naked. Okay? Like, he's naked at the Bugle. He's covered with desks, etc., and he walks into the Bugle and says to Betty, "Is Jonah in?" And that grabs you a little bit. You don't see that often. Peter waking up naked, walking into work. And so, I mean, that's a common dream. You're naked somewhere. I mean, I had it last night. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You were there, Mike. I'm kidding.
You weren't supposed to talk about that, Brad. We agreed.
Anyway, bottom line, Nightmare is messing with Spider-Man. And Hulk, I think, is in the crossroads at this point because he was banished by Doctor Strange in Hulk 300. And so to punish Nightmare, he made the Hulk constantly attack him, etc. And he wanted a hero to get him out of this conundrum that he's in. So he gets into Spider-Man's dreams, and Spider-Man successfully eliminates the Hulk for a little bit. And then Nightmare says, you know what? You did such a good job. Why don't you stick around? You'll be stuck here in the Nightmare. And out through one green hand comes in and grabs him and puts Nightmare back in his place, and Spider-Man is released. Just a one and done fun Spider-Man and Hulk team up, as penciled by Sal Buscema, I think one of both of our favorite Hulk artists.
Oh yeah, no question about it.
I mean, again, it's just a one and done. Talk about your love of this story. I love this story. It's weird, but it's cool.
It's a weird story, but it also goes to the heart of the ability to tell a single story like this in one issue and make it memorable. I'm not going to get on my soapbox and start complaining about comics these days because I just don't have it in me to ever do that again. I did enough of that in my 30s. I think now that I'm approaching my 50s, I'm getting mellower.
I hit 50 this year. It's crazy.
But no, the thing about this story and the thing about all of his early amazing issues and web of issues is that they were all really solid one and dones. Yes. That you get to the end of it, you're completely satisfied. It's a complete meal. Absolutely. All in one package. And you don't get that as much these days. And it's just, and again, that's not a judgment call on that saying that comics are bad in the modern era. They're just different storytelling. The average storytelling of a superhero comic these days has a very particular feel to it. But the thing about Peter David is that he could write extended storylines that lasted years, or he could write a one-issue story, and both of them are equally as entertaining.
Yeah. You're talking about if you felt satisfied after reading a one and done. Paul Jenkins. I'm a big fan of Paul Jenkins. He wrote on Facebook about Peter David's passing that Peter David, one of his best traits was to write a satisfying. He gave you your money's worth. If you're paying $4 for a book, he wants some bang for your buck. He wants you to have a good time, not a filler issue. He wants you to, the ratio of reading and enjoyment should be a good money well spent. And I think a lot of times, back to the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, there were several padded issues in that I felt like I didn't get the value of it. I think for the most part, and everybody has stinkers, but I think he had more winners than stinkers. And Peter David gave you good value for your reading experience and your money.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's just all around one of the greats. And we're not really going to see his like again. And I don't say that very often, but for his ability to work within a number of mediums, like I said before, comics, novels, short stories, television, movies. It's the Trancers films, but he wrote them.
Yeah. And also interactions with fans. It was very good. I imagine everybody has a bad story or two about somebody. But for the most part, I really haven't heard anything bad said about him, with the exception of Todd McFarlane or John Byrne. But interactions with him, I think, fan-wise, was always good.
Well, Byrne never got over the whole Alpha Flight thing with Peter David, so I know. They were still arguing about that 10 years ago.
I went to should I say it? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to say it. I went to Byrne's message board after Peter David passed away. I wanted to see if he was saying anything. He wrote condolences, one word. And then in another thread on the message board, he goes, I've been to 3 news sources and they're reporting Peter David's death. Jack Kirby never got this kind of publicity. Times sure have changed. That was John Byrne's sole contribution.
Really? Because I remember when Kirby died. It was a pretty big deal.
I don't know. Not according to John Byrne's message board. Anyway, this is about Peter David. We're going to go to chat. Adam says, Peter David just thought his stuff through so well and so fun to read. I would agree. Let's see. I'm going to go to the top because I haven't really been hitting up chat that often. So, Zach is in chat. He talks about Peter David set a bar in writing thanks to his Hulk run. His run on Spec changed the game. His friendly neighbor was incredibly romp. That was a hint of sadness now that both Ringo and him have passed. Yes, Mike Ringo was a very, very talented writer. I hate that effing Spider-Man. Great line, Zach. I agree. Let's see. We have best memories was from Ryan. Says that was during the Three Mysterio story, like in Friendly Neighborhood, he let me see the proof copy of part 2. He got like the day before he got to Chicago, and he joined us for pizza at Gino's East that day. So Ryan, that's awesome. Very cool. Very neat. I love that. Again, Chad, if you got Peter David stories, I'd love to read them up here. He signed my Hulk with first appearance of the Thunderbolts. There you go. I read it. I listened to a recent interview. He said he didn't create the Thunderbolts. That was Kurt Busiek's creation, but he just appeared in Hulk's issue 449. Does that sound about right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was an expensive issue to buy too, by the way.
Yeah. Yep. Comet says that the Venom 65437 was a classic crawl space moment. I would agree. That was very, very funny. Gary and the Frozen, did he have a run on Superman, Mike?
No, he wrote Supergirl, but he never had a run on Superman. I not that he wouldn't have had a good run. I don't think that was his kind of character to write, in all honesty.
Well, I mean, Jerry Conway talks about how did both. I mean, you don't think Superman's
it's not, but Conway is more of a traditional superhero writer. So, and Peter David, like I said, I think he would have done a great run on like Batman or Superman, but his strength was in taking characters that weren't as popular and making them popular.
Yes. Hence X Factor.
Yeah.
Did you read his X Factor, the second round with Mad
I
Max?
read most of it and I really enjoyed it. There was a girl and she knew things.
Yeah. That was good. Adam also says, I remember Peter David calling Brand New Day Anything Can Happen Day. If you go back to that 2021 interview, he has a great pitch for, help me out, chat. It was a great story about, was it Jonah dying and Norman takes over the Bugle? It was a fun story. I can't, his pitch is really good for it. I should have cut that one out. Yeah, that was a fun story. I remember his but I disagree column. No, his but I digress. And the Comic Buyers, yes, we talked about that, Matt. That was.
But if anybody was going to write a column called "But I Disagree," it would have been Peter.
Let's see. I remember Peter David sparring with Eric Larson in the letters pages over Hulk knocking out Doc Ock. I do remember that. Remember that adjectiveless Spider-Man?
Yep.
Spider-Man versus the Sinister Six. And yeah, I remember that. Doc Ock had adamantium arms at the time, and the Hulk goes, ding. If there is Peter David criticism, people have said that if he doesn't like something, he'll retcon it, as evidenced when the Bruce Jones stuff happened in the Hulk. Peter David had like an 8-issue run. And he was like, yeah, that didn't really happen.
I still don't know how I feel about that, because that seems like kind of a crappy thing to do. I mean, the Bruce Jones run did kind of fizzle at the end through really no fault of Bruce Jones's. But yeah, I reread that a couple years ago, and I'm like, wow, I forgot how hardcore this was about trying to make everything you just read over the past like 2 years not happen.
Well, I mean, one more day. Hey, they weren't really married. I mean, it's part of comics. It's part of comics, and they've been doing it forever.
Where would the Crawlspace podcast be without Brand New Day?
Oh my God, we predate it. The Netadon, is this live or Memorex? To quote Adam, it's live, baby. As Keith DeCandido said on Facebook, Peter was Daffy Duck to Harlan Ellison's Bugs Bunny.
That's very accurate.
Let's see. And we still don't know who Facade is. That was a Howard Mackey problem. If memory serves, that wasn't Peter David.
I think they got an ointment for that. If you got a Howard Mackey.
I've got a bad facade, Doctor. Anyway. Vinkman, my very first Peter David story was Hulk 409.
Okay.
What was 409? Refresh me. I think he's in the suburbs with Betty about that point, right?
No, that was before the Pantheon fell. That was during the Gary Frank era.
Is this the one where his sidekick died? Remember that one?
I think
From
it was the one where
age,
he,
that was
he
a-
did a lot of
that was-
cleaning because it was 409.
Oh God,
There's your terrible joke.
I collect them all. But anyway, that was good. Let's see. Peter David was a really special Spider-Man writer. Don't think he gets his due. He was one of the best. The death of the grumpy old guy says the death of Gene DeWolff is the best arc in my opinion. I got $10 worth of entertainment for $3.50. Tight storytelling and nothing was wasted. Rest in peace.
Oh,
Peter David.
Venkman, you poor bastard.
What was 409?
It was the one where Marvel UK's Motormouth and
Oh, yeah, that's not. Yeah.
I can't read that. Yeah, but it was Marvel UK characters crossing over.
I remember that. Yeah, not one of my favorites. Let's see. Tevia says it breaks my heart that we lost a creator like him. We probably won't see one like him again. Adam says he did a handful of web issues. Correct. He did one where his apartment got burned down. I remember that one. I was 17 in 1985. Thanks for making me feel old, Brad. Says the grumpy old guy. With a handle like that.
I think you're wearing that one on your sleeve, dude.
Adam also says Peter David definitely got my attention at a young age. Had to check who the writer of was The Return of the Sin Eater. We didn't talk about Sin Eater. Yeah, there was a story in Spec where a boy is shot from a helicopter. I remember that was graphic too. Because he was he a mutant or what was, I forget what that story was.
Yeah.
But it's taking me back. Matt says the death of Gene DeWolff showed that the darker side of Spider-Man at the time, but I love that story very much. Yeah, that's what the goal was Spec, make it a darker Spider-Man. Like, you got to have a reason why there's 4 titles out there.
Yep.
And make them all have a different taste or flavor. I read that the Sin Eater sequel first, knew it was a Stan Carter, and the first story still packed a huge punch reading it, says Adam. Let's see. Michael Bailey. I wish it was happier in search, but love a reunion. Yes, I think we have chemistry, Mike.
A little bit. Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
About a half cup.
I tell you, this Hulk show, I think we've talked about it. Let's see. I actually thought The Foreigner, they did The Foreigner well in the Craven movie. Also, very inspired by Peter David's work, clearly.
Wait, Foreigner was a... Okay, to be fair, I have not seen any of the Morbius, Madam Web, Craven movies. So,
come on, you're missing out.
Am I, though? Am I really?
Well, from someone who has seen the Dolph Lundgren Punisher and the 90s Captain America and the 2000s Man-Thing book or movie, yeah, you're missing out. These are better than all those.
I don't know, man. Dolph Lundgren's Punisher is a classic, and I will die.
I saw someone get a picture with Dolph Lundgren, and on the other side was Bernthal. So it was at a convention. You can get both of these, and I would have bought that. I think that would have been a great thing. Anyway, yes, The Foreigner is in the Craven movie. Yes, there's a couple other Spider-Man villains in the Craven. Craven wasn't that bad.
Well, it had a good cast. I will say that.
Yeah.
And it seemed to be the one that they messed with least during the production of.
Yeah.
I think with the Madam Web movie, the thing that got me is that the trailer had all these great shots of these characters in costume, and that's like a dream sequence in the film.
Oh, that was Madam Web. And
I'm
that's
like,
the only time they're really in suit. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just terrible.
When was Future Imperfect the 2-part arc? Early 90s. I'd say 92, 93 maybe.
Yeah, if you buy the Epic collection that it's in, it actually places it where it was, because if you're reading the Hulk book, the Rick Jones's granddaughter shows up.
Mm-hmm. And
there's a whole thing, and then that subplot just disappears, but that's because it goes over into Future Imperfect. Which he did with George Perez.
Yeah. Adam says Jim Shooter used to push for creators getting royalties, and at DC, Joey says Paul Levitz used to do it also. He talks about Brubaker.
One thing about Future Imperfect, though, one of the reasons why George Perez did the artwork is that George's wife loved Peter's Star Trek books.
Oh, that's cool.
So she was like, yeah, you need to work with this guy.
And he was also the moderator. He was also the moderator of the Todd McFarlane Peter David debate that you can see on YouTube. Brad, please read What Savage Beast on Alive. No, I'm good. I'm good. He did read at a convention I was at. Peter David read one of his novels. I think it was Aquaman. I think it was the script for Aquaman.
Yeah, that
he read at one of the conventions in Chicago.
Yeah, Dragon Con 2004 or 5 at a panel, he read the script for the issue of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man about the blogger that just writes bad things about Spider-Man all the time, and Mary Jane tells her off at the end. Yeah. It was interesting watching him read his material. He was very good at that.
Oh, he's a performer. He's a writer that was an extrovert, was a good performer. Which reminds me, he probably learned that from Harlan Ellison. Harlan Ellison also was a great writer and also a performer. And he owned a room when both those guys were in it. McNulty says 5 minutes is an awesome story. Although it's a prose piece, it was one where I wish would be adapted into a comic book one-shot. Mm-hmm. If memory serves, I think the Hulk had an Ultimate Hulk book with short stories. And at the very end, it was like Hulk at the end of the war. At the end of the
Hulk
world.
the End, which they adapted with
yes. So I thought that was kind of cool. If you haven't read that, it's just the Hulk and cockroaches, I think, at the end of the world, which why not? Let's see. I remember when it came out in 92, felt so fresh, kind of Blade Runner inspired. I guess they're talking about Future Imperfect, is what Adam's talking about. Let's see. Oh, no, he's referencing 2099. That's what he's referencing. Not only was Peter David a great comic book writer, he was also a fantastic Star Trek writer. Yep. New Frontier, all the next gen. A classic Trek. He did comic books for DC. He relaunched it. There's a volume 2 of Trek that, I remember one of the characters was RJ Blaze, which stood for Raspberry Jam. Why I remember that, I have no idea.
He left that gig because one of the people that worked for Roddenberry did not like Peter David's work. Had a real burr up his ass about him. And to make Robert Greenberger, who was the editor's life easier, Peter left. But to test if it's really, if it's his work or just the name, he submitted a story as written by Robert Bruce Banner, and the guy had no problems with it.
Man, he has fought editorial his whole career.
Yeah, well, yes.
One of the best DC Star Trek was one where Kirk was dealing with the death of a crew member who sacrificed them to save Kirk. I didn't read the Trek before the relaunch of Peter David's stuff, but I hear it's awesome. Joey Z, they're saying there's rumors that the Hulk's going to be in the next team-up movie in the Spider-Man movie, and Mr. Negative will turn him savage again. Let's go. Hulk and Spider-Man on the screen. I'm there.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're just, why don't you just say, hey, Brad, we're writing this for you, specifically.
Why not? It's, Tevia says his favorite run of Peter David, 2099 and Young Justice. Let's see. I'm looking at Pat on Libby, the online library. He's done a ton of comic book movie novels, Star Trek Dark Tower. Ah, yes. He adapted Stephen King's Dark Tower in comic book form several years ago.
With Jay
also
Lee.
Halo, the video game. I remember, because I used to read Peter David's blog on his website, and Peter David was in the hospital, and who shows up at Stephen King at the hospital? So he was friends with Stephen King. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing that Stephen King comes to your hospital bed.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Stephen King seems like a pleasant guy.
Yeah. Adam says his X Factor run was great. I would agree. He wrote some animated Young Justice. McNulty also agrees that X Factor with
the series Bible for the 2003 Teen Titans cartoon, that eventually became Teen Titans Go. But he basically developed that for them.
Yep. Loved his first X Factor run, says Adam, with Larry Stroman art.
Yep.
Adam says, I'm surprised he didn't do more TV work. He did some Babylon 5. Never really watched Babylon 5, but
wrote a couple episodes of Babylon 5 for JMS.
Yep, so did Harlan Ellison. I remember. Let's see. We are almost. Let's see. I have the Star Trek Q Squared novel of Star Trek, and it tied to the original character named Trelane, but still have read it yet. But I need to. Yep, I remember that novel. They put out several omnibuses about Peter David, and they put the actual series in the amalgam one to sell it. Oh, I remember that. Speaking of, news just broke this week. Batman versus Deadpool. Thoughts? I'm there.
I'm passing.
Okay.
I'm not a big Deadpool fan.
Yeah. Even the
because
movies?
I'm dead inside, but that's okay.
Even the movie? You don't care for the movies?
They're fine. It's just not. It's like Lobo in the 90s. It was just so oversaturated. But now we're getting Aquaman as Lobo, so in the Supergirl film. So, I guess everything comes back at some point.
McNulty asks, our first exposure to Peter David with his Star Trek novel, Imzadi, was his first exposure. What was the first thing of Peter David that you read? Go ahead, Mike. What's yours?
An issue of Spectacular Spider-Man that I got randomly right when I was starting to kind of collect comics as a going concern. It's the issue with a dude sitting on the desk with his feet up and he's holding a gun. I enjoyed it at the time, but I figured it out. That was the first Peter David book I had ever read.
I think the one that made me take a notice who wrote it was The Death of Gene DeWolff. But then I looked back at ASM 267 and The Commuter Cometh. I'm like, oh, it's the same guy. Oh, I really like his writing style. That's what did it for me, Mike. So, Adam says his first was 289 in Return of the Sin Eater. I don't know how to answer this one, McNulty. What was his best story?
Savage Beast?
Yeah.
I'm not even lying on that. If I had to if you ask me what his best story was, it's What Savage Beast.
The one that I go back to a lot, and it's not Spider-Man related, is his last issue of Hulk. 367, I think was the number. I was pissed that he wasn't able to continue it. Again, editorial really affected it. It's very similar to what happened with Chris Claremont and the X-Men. I mean, Peter David could continue to write Hulk a lot longer than he did, I think. But his last issue,
they wanted to take the Hulk in a different direction that he didn't want to go in. Though I remember talking to Paul Jenkins once.
Yeah.
And I asked him what it was like taking over the Hulk. He's like, "Oh, I had it easy. I didn't have to replace Peter David. I had to replace John Byrne." And I'm like, no truer words spoken in jest.
and I said this on the show. Paul Jenkins came the closest, I think. And I asked Jenkins on an interview once, I'm like, why didn't you do no more Hulk? He goes, I'm not that guy. I'm not that angry or pissed inside. And Peter David had a little bit of anger inside when he was going through a divorce in his Hulk run.
Well, that Betty's time of death is the time that he signed his divorce papers, right?
Yeah. Life imitates art. I mean, that's crazy. That's where the writer, I'm not a writer, but that's probably where you get your ideas and it comes out in more different ways. I think we're at the end of the chat. I'm going to look. Mike says that the Scarlet Spider ongoing was a valiant attempt to course correct Clone Conspiracy by Dan Slott. So of course Marvel ignored it for some strange reason. Yeah, valid. Let's see. What does Michael Bailey think of Slott's Superman so far? Oh,
Michael Bailey has not read the first issue yet. Michael Bailey has it on his iPad. I'm about 6 months behind on all new stuff. But I bought it. It's just so funny to me that like you keep seeing Superman and Spider-Man people. Like I mean, I survived Bendis, so I have nothing against Slott though. That's the weird thing. I've like disliked only a couple of things of his that I've read. I don't think like his Spider-Man run, for example. Is it all great? No, but God, Superior Spider-Man was like one of the best things I had read in a long time when I finally caught up with that book. So, you know, if we get more, if his Superman run is Superior Spider-Man quality, it's going to be great.
Or it could not. His Fantastic Four and his Iron Man run were really not good. So anyway, Adam says, I think most of the time Pad was really good at working in whatever status quo from what I've read. So whatever he was given, wherever they planted him, he bloomed. I've always liked that saying, and that's very true for Peter David. Let's see. In the Epic Collection, Future Imperfect, placed between the Trojan War and Rook Jones's wedding. Okay. Do you think the Beyond the Spider-Verse will add a mention of Peter David in remembrance since he created Miguel? They should.
Should also cut that family a check, but
absolutely. Let's see. I think I've said enough. Quote Rick Jones. So there you go. I think that's a pretty good way to end it. I want to do this before we go. Let me close this and I'm going to share my screen and remind you about the family has medical bills. If you would like to donate on the GoFundMe, they have a goal. They have not yet reached it. So GoFundMe.com/F/help-Peter-David. Again, go there and check out and help support the family of Peter David. They are grieving, and our thoughts and our prayers go out to him and his family. And so if you could help them out, that would be amazing. Final thoughts, Michael, on losing one of our favorite writers of all times.
The sucky thing is that this is just going to keep happening. Just because these people are getting older. The Triangle era of Superman lost Jackson Geiss recently. But this one, I don't normally get upset about celebrities dying. I mean, I feel bad. It's not like I'm heartless or anything. But very rarely somebody passes away that has a significance with me. And I've been bummed about this all week. I was telling my wife this tonight that, when we were getting ready for dinner, I was just like, it just sucks because it's not like we knew each other personally. It's not like, we exchanged emails and phone calls and such. But he was part of my life and a particular part of my life for decades. And I got to thank him for What Savage Beast, and I'm glad I did. But I don't think I'll ever adequately be able to do that. This doesn't happen often, but when it does, it really does hurt. And I'm just feeling so bad for Kathleen and the family right now, and what they're going through. And for the love of God, Marvel, step up. At long last, step up and start helping these people so that this doesn't happen again.
I agree. I wouldn't call him a friend. I would call him an acquaintance. But it touched my life as a fan of Spider-Man and the Hulk, etc. And I was lucky that I too thanked him for his years of writing stuff that I've loved. And if you go by that Here Cometh the Commuter story, 40 years I've been reading Peter David stuff, 1985 to now. 40 years. He's always, it's going to seem weird because there is always a new Peter David book coming out in some form, not just Spider-Man. There was something else coming out, and to find out that Symbiote Spider-Man 2099 was his last thing that he wrote, and that was the end. It's very sad that that portion, that thing that we've relied on for so many years, has come to an end. But he left a hell of a legacy.
Yeah.
He's left a lot of fans better off, character-wise, etc. I'm better off for reading his stuff, and I think you are too, and so many fans in chat and that are watching this tonight. So, my friend, thank you for doing this with me for 2 hours.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for chat for watching this, and I think we will end it right here.